Morning, everybody. This is Running Effective Campaigns. My name is Debra Erenberg. I'm going to speak first about just some of the steps to take to plan a strategic and effective campaign, as well as some good tools that you can use with your group as you're working through and thinking about how you want to plan out your campaign. And then Michael Weber is going to talk about, I believe, some specific farm campaigns.
Not farm
campaigns.
Public outreach campaigns as opposed to targeted campaigns.
Public outreach campaigns and also evaluating your campaigns.
Yeah, that's correct. Yep.
Okay. So, first of all, question is, what is a campaign? And a campaign is the story about how you won your issue. And you want to actually know how this story goes before you ever launch your campaign, because the time that you have the most control over your campaign is before you launch. So there's a whole lot of stuff that you have to go through to really get yourself prepared to be as successful as possible once you do launch. And also to be ready to kind of roll with situations that change that you didn't anticipate when you were writing the story to begin with. So it's a story, but it's also a story that's a work in progress. A well-planned campaign won't just achieve your issue-related goals, it will also build up your group, leave you stronger than when you started, leave you in a better position to win your next campaign, and hopefully also give you a lot of energy and momentum, as well as something fun to celebrate. Now, there are differences between running a campaign and having an action, or even a series of actions. You know, your group may come out every Saturday morning and demonstrate in front of a fur store, but is that a campaign? It might be if you're working from a strategy about how those campaigns build in with other actions and are going to lead to your goal. If it's just people coming out every Saturday, though, it could be a valuable exercise in outreach and public education. It could help build attention to your group. It could help you recruit new members, but it's not what I would call a campaign. And hopefully this will become more clear as I walk through some of the elements of a campaign. So first of all, before we launch our campaign, before we even decide exactly what our campaign is going to be about, we need to do some research. The more you can possibly learn about the issue that you want to affect beforehand, the better off you're going to be. So you want to know who the key players are in the industry, what other groups or movements might be targeting them at this time, and what sort of results they've had with their efforts, what sort of tactics do they use. You want to know, who else in your community might have an issue or might have a position on this, who else might be able to be brought in, and who makes the decisions at, if it's a company you're going to be targeting or even a legislative body you're going to be targeting. Who are the key decision makers and who has influence over those people. So the more of that you can find out before you even start thinking through what your strategy is going to be, the better positioned you'll be to really plan a strong and effective strategy. So we're going to start out by creating goals for our campaign. And your goals should be SMART. You've probably heard that acronym before. Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-based. So, if you want to, any goal that you think of, you want to check against those criteria. So, winning rights for all animals, that's an important vision. That's an important mission for us to be working for, but it's not a SMART goal for a campaign. we want to have something that can be wait a minute, you're not going to leave here saying, Debra Erenberg said it's not realistic to plan to win rights for all animals. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is when you're running a campaign, you want to know specifically what the portion of moving towards winning rights for all animals your specific campaign is going to accomplish. And you want to frame that in a way that makes it very clear, makes it measurable so you know when you get there, and that's time-based so that you know what you're building towards and how long you need to have the resources and the people power available to get yourselves there. Is that clear? Okay. So it is important to have a larger vision that guides the work that you do. So don't lose sight of that bigger picture of winning rights for all animals, but just make sure that you have a more specific goal for your campaign itself. So it could be something like, get the city council to require companion animals to be spayed or neutered and prohibit the sale of animals from puppy mills by December 2013. Now you know exactly who you're targeting there, you know when you're going to have it happen, and you know exactly what your legislative goal is there. And to get to that goal, you can build in short-term and mid-term goals that help you move along the way to that and build you further, but also give you points to celebrate along the way. Like we want to get 4 sponsors for this bill by July, and then when you've got your 4 sponsors in May, you can celebrate because you're ahead of your schedule and you're kicking butt, and now you've got 6 people and you only thought it was going to be 4, and look at this momentum that's rolling us towards our victory. So once you know what your goal is, you can choose your target. And your target is the person. 1, 2, maybe 3, I wouldn't go more than that, who has the power to give you what you want. So it shouldn't be an entire institution. Like a lot of times people will say, oh, we're targeting Congress. Congress is something like 500 something people. I'm sorry, my legislative math is a little fuzzy. I don't think that anybody in this room can effectively target an entire Congress, and I don't think it's a smart use of resources because frankly, there's people in Congress who control how other people vote. There's people who how they line up. So let's take a slightly smaller sized example and go back to our goal of getting the city council to ban puppy mills, ban sale of dogs from puppy mills. On that city council, if you've done your research, you know that there's 3 people who love puppy mills, get all their campaign money from the puppy mills, and you're just not going to get their votes. You know that there's 3 people who love animals. They come out for all the spay-neuter days. They're dependable. You don't need to target them. You probably want to make some good supportive statements and think about how they can help move you along, but they're not your target. There's maybe 1 or 2 or 3 people in the middle who are going to swing this thing one way or the other way. And it's really important for you to know who those people are. And, these 3 people who are reliable allies on the council, they may be the people who can help you figure out who they are and what the best ways of approaching them are. But you really want to zero in on the people or person who has the power to give you what you want. I would also say I've seen a lot of campaigns out there where people say, oh, our target is President Obama. President Obama is not a great target for a campaign. Not necessarily because he's not somebody who makes a lot of important decisions, but because he's so hard to influence. I mean, he gets thousands and thousands of messages every day about tons of issues, but there's probably a specific person in a specific department in his administration that actually makes the decision that's going to come out under his name that you're actually working towards. So find that person, and that's your target. Okay. So once you've got your target, the next thing to do is figure out who has influence over that target. Is it campaign contributors? Is it somebody in their place of worship? Is it somebody at their golf course, their wife? Figure out who are the people with influence over that person, and are there people within that sphere of influence who you all may be able to build a relationship with and help leverage that influence to play a role with your primary target. Okay, so once you've chosen your target, then you can map out a strategy that will show how you exert the influence you need to get your target to do what you want. And if a campaign is a story, your strategy is the plot line. It's the thread that ties together all of the various pieces into one coherent whole and really gives you the narrative. So don't think about your strategy as just a string of actions that you're going to take. When you're doing your plan, tell yourself the story of your campaign as if you were looking backwards in time. Talk about, hey, now how did we go about raising awareness of this issue? And how did we build power and bring important allies over to our side? How did we tell our story to the media and to the public? How did we build pressure over time until our target really had no choice but to do what we wanted? Because with a good story, you can get a sense of where it's leading way before it gets there, and then it's almost inevitable when you get to the end of the story. And that's what we want to build with our campaigns. So the next step is starting to figure out your tactics. Tactics also serve multiple purposes. For example, tabling at community events can be a great tactic for getting petition signatures and getting the word out about your particular campaign, but it can also be a very valuable way of letting the community know about your group, recruiting new members, hopefully bringing in some donations. So there's a lot of other things that you can be accomplishing at the same time that you're moving your campaign forward. So, a good campaign, really think through how we're going to use every step we take to also build up our group and make us stronger, so that we're not going to just win this one, we're going to win the next 6 and 7 and 8 down the road, and this one's going to help set us up to do it. Now, tactics tend to escalate or become more confrontational as a campaign goes on. So, for example, most of the time you wouldn't want to start a campaign with a highly confrontational tactic like a direct action, a lockdown, or something like that. Now, you may have thought through your strategy and decided that the element of surprise is really important in this campaign for some reason, and we need to start out by hitting them really hard to get their attention. And so we are going to start with a direct action just to really let them know we're out there. And, if you know strategically why you're doing that, and you know where you're going to be going from that and what your next step is, that's great. Most campaigns, though, you're going to start out by sending a very nice, polite letter to your target, basically saying, hi there, we wanted to let you know that there's this bad thing happening, and we want to ask you to stop doing it. And give them all of your well-researched reasons why they should stop doing it. They're going to ignore that letter most of the time. And so what you want to do, is expect that and be prepared to then take your campaign public and start elevating from there, building up, becoming increasingly confrontational. The most important thing is that you're not just exercising your tactics, just kind of like throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. You want to have a real sense of how one tactic is leading to another, and how that's moving your strategy forward. And also, as you're planning, calendarize everything. This is especially important for student groups. If you're building up your momentum and going and going and going, and then it's finals and then it's summer vacation, you've got to start your campaign all over again, practically, when you come back in the fall. So really think through how you're going to plot out your timeline. If it's a legislative thing, look at the legislative calendar, make sure it makes sense from that perspective, and build out a campaign that works well for you while you have that opportunity. So I'm just going to speak very briefly to some of the tools and the handouts that I passed out. The Planning a Campaign handout, on the back of it is an exercise called Spectrum of Allies. And this is something that you all can use to kind of plot out who is in this field with you, so that you can reach out to them at the very earliest stages in your campaign. You want to know, who's already a strong ally on this issue, who's sort of a passive ally, who's neutral, who's a passive opponent, and who's going to be an active opponent. And think very broadly through this. And as you're planning your strategies, think about what can we do to move people one wedge to the left. So what actions can we take so that our active opponents can somehow be persuaded to be a little bit more passive about this? How can we make our passive opponents neutral? And ideally, how can we make our passive allies into active allies and get them into the game so we've got more numbers? So think about how messaging affects that and things like that. The Battle of the Story worksheet, the people at Smart Meme are really smart, and they've got great resources on their website. The Battle of the Story is a worksheet that you can go through to really think through, how does the general public and how do our opponents view this issue right now? And how do we view it? What's our story? So that we can stop talking from their perspective and start talking from our perspective and bring our perspective to this. And finally, the Tactics Star is just a great way to evaluate tactics that you're thinking about using. Thinking about whether the messaging and the tone of the tactic really fits with the strategy, will help you reach the allies you want to reach, or will it have a negative impact on the allies you want to reach? These are great tools to work through with your entire group as you're going through the planning process. The very last point that I'll make is as you get to your short-term goals, to your midterm goals, and certainly to your overall campaign goal, celebrate every step of the way. We don't do nearly enough celebration in this movement, and we have a lot to celebrate. So celebrate, it gives you energy, it gives you momentum, it lets you see the progress that you're making, and it lets other people see the progress that you're making. So have fun, win campaigns, and do good. Thank you.
Thanks, Deborah. I love having you go before me on this because you really just lay it all out there perfectly. I think it's just a phenomenal talk that you give. My name is Michael Weber. I'm the program, you probably know this by now, right? I'm the program director of Farm Animal Rights Movement. We do organize this conference. And we also work to end the use of animals for food. And we run a lot of campaigns. But they're a different type of campaign, actually. I'm going to switch gears a little bit, but everything I'm saying is 100% complementary to what Debra has been talking about. We run campaigns to get people to make behavioral changes, not campaigns to get governments or corporations to change their policies, change their practices. And this is equally important, especially because I happen to personally know that a handful of people in this room do outreach on behavioral change. And I think that a lot of people that do behavioral change really don't think in terms of campaigns. You know, we think about reaching individuals and having them change, and that's awesome and it's super important, but it can be even more awesome, more effective, and more important if we run it, if we see it through the same lens that Debra's been talking about with these campaigns. So most outreach and education that's done doesn't meet any of the criteria, basically, that Debra gave for a campaign, right? We're just going out there and we're talking to people, we're reaching them. And on the flip side, most campaigns, like the one Debra's we're talking about, are not really outreach campaigns. They're generally aimed at a target that is at some level an adversary of yours. You know, even if it's a friendly, non-aggressive campaign, you're still trying to get an adversary to do something that you want. And it's a very different approach when we're trying to get someone to not be seen as an adversary, but actually someone that we want to move along a spectrum in a completely positive, friendly way. It's a different way of seeing it, but it's still kind of through the lens of campaign. And I actually, before I get started on some of the specifics, what Debra said about the spectrum of allies applies in, I think, a really different and interesting way here, in that when we want behavioral change from someone, that's exactly what we're doing with them too, is we want the people that hate us to kind of stop hating us and just, kind of dislike us. We want those that dislike our message to just be okay with it and stop, maybe fighting it and just be neutral about it. We want those neutral about our message to start making some changes that we want them to make. And we want those who are making some changes to become real allies and make all the changes we want them to make. So when it comes to diet, for instance, those who trash veganism and really knock it, we want them to just kind of dislike veganism quietly, right? And those who dislike it quietly, we want them to feel okay about veganism, maybe feel like it's a good thing for some people to do. Those who feel like it's, a fine thing, we want them to start going vegan a few days a week or whatnot. And those who are vegetarian or vegan a few days a week or pescatarian, anything in that, flexitarian, we want those to become the dedicated vegans and become activists. So the spectrum of allies works when you're looking at a whole range of allies to begin a campaign. It also works in a completely different way as far as who we want to reach how when we're reaching out to individuals on behavioral change. And so when we are running these, or when we're reaching out to people, we can still set goals. We don't have to just talk to people and hope that we're going to reach some people and make some change. We actually can set outreach goals.